got it in Restream. So we're good. We've got it in Vimeo. Hang tight. Okay. You're live on Vimeo. So whenever you're ready.
She has to unmute herself.
Good morning, everyone, from Crestone, Colorado. It's the second day of Sparkling Conversations. I am very pleased to let you know that Jim Garrison and Andrew Cameron Bailey will be joining me in a few moments. I just want to go over a few things and let you know what to expect as we go through this. I want to tell you that yesterday's was really, really exciting, having women and youth be the theme for the day. Excited to have a panel of 4 women join me to talk about the transformation of education for future generations. And then we went to the afterglow, and that's something that I want to tell you about. After we finish our 2 hours here, we're going to pop over to theconversation.cc, where I hope you will have joined the watch party to watch this, and then the panelists will join you in the conversation.cc for the afterglow. I want to let you know that Linda White, who was scheduled to be on this conversation, has had a glitch in her life, and so she won't be joining us. And however, we do have Lisa Ayres stop with me, and she's also from British Columbia, Canada. And she's going, well, Lisa, why don't you tell them what you're going to be doing?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. So I will be at the watch party with the listeners and the audience, keeping track of their chats, interacting with them, and just generally getting a feel for what the theme of the conversation becomes. And then I'll pop back in at the end of the conversation, let everyone know what the emerging themes have become, and some poignant questions that we want to discuss when we go to the afterglow back on the conversation.cc.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I look forward to hearing from you. And thanks for taking care of the watch party. That's an important part of this. You know, if we can't have a global conversation, it's just more of the same, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so off you go, and we'll see you later. I also want to mention to you, ladies and gentlemen, out there in the virtual world, there is a place that you can come to online to the virtual world. We've got a bunch of movies, about 80 movies that are being shown in the virtual world. Don't go now or in the hour after we finish, because the Sparkling Conversations are only here now. Well, they're recorded and you can watch them later too, but the virtual world has 80 films there that you can have a look at, and there's a whole bunch of other things. You can find the virtual world through going into the EarthStock summit.com website, go up into watch, and then there's the virtual world choose that you can go and have a look. I also want to mention that this is going to be on YouTube as a live event, and you can see past events there, and on Facebook there's a live event as well. And so that is housekeeping. I want to tell you about how this Sparkling Conversation happened. The EarthStock Eco-Spiritual Summit was inspired by the 30th anniversary of the birth of the first white buffalo calf when Chief Phil Lane Jr. asked Michael DiMartino what was being planned for the occasion. Another inspiration led to these sparkling conversations. Humanity Rising began with the COVID lockdown. Jim Garrison, the president of Ubiquity University, was the host, and he's provided almost 1,000 presentations or panel discussions since then. On day 60, Stan Pockris got curious about all the names that kept showing up in the chat and put an invitation in the chat to his Zoom after the program was finished. And we've been coming back after every episode ever since. I've become the moderator, and because of our collective appreciation of Jim's perspective and eloquence, as well as his moving to Washington to midwife the UAP disclosure bill through the US Congress, I've been transcribing his opening comments into a blog he invited me to call Jim's Nuggets. So that's been going on since September. And shortly after Jim moved to Washington, current events required a change of focus. And today, I'm thrilled that EarthStock's theme of the day, Ancient Prophecies and Future Visions of World Cultures, allows us to dive more deeply into the implications of the US government secrecy and UAP UFO disclosure. What are non-human intelligence known as NHI, and to explore what prophecy is. I wonder about how civilization changes when we acknowledge intelligent entities beyond human. Whether or how ETs and NHI are related to God, and how we can navigate fear, wonder, and potential collaboration. I want to introduce our speakers today, starting with Andrew Cameron Bailey. He discusses ancient prophecies, indigenous wisdom, and future visions of a world connected with NHI. And his work on the trust frequency and his books and his films explore the relationship between wisdom and the future. And I expect that Andrew will be put on screen with me, and then we can transition over to Andrew. Andrew, there you are.
I think I'm here. Hello, everybody.
Would you like to introduce yourself, sir? Thank you so much.
I will be happy to do that, Shannon, and thank you for the beautiful mini intro you just did. That was about all I needed to say, but I can say a lot more. Yeah. So, friends, folks, listeners, strangers who are simply friends one is yet to meet, thank you. I'm sitting here in Crestone, Colorado, in the back of a beautiful Mercedes Sprinter vehicle that we call the Trust Mobile. And as Shannon mentioned, I am the co-author with Connie Baxter Marlowe of a book called The Trust Frequency. And in a sense, it's a future-oriented book, because the question is, how is this species of ours going to co-create a desirable future? So far, we have been co-creating a disaster, apparently, from what I can tell looking around. We've also co-created a lot of extraordinarily beautiful music and art and community and babies and just all of the gorgeous things that we humans have done. On the other hand, my hypothesis is that we have been running on an outdated, erroneous operating system, which is the set of fundamental assumptions that drive everything we think, say, and do. And if we look at those assumptions, we'll find that, wait a minute, when did I agree to that? I believe that? No, I don't. Yes, you do. It's subconscious. It's deep in there. It's generations deep. So that's a part of the futuristic, if you will, work that I have been engaged in for a very long time. And I think this, Shannon, this subject is absolutely fascinating. Jim, I'm so pleased to be on this panel with you. You are one of my most respected scholars, among so many other things, and friends. As you know, certainly everyone on this panel knows that we're in the middle of making a sequel to our 2007 film, In Search of the Future. So we went in search of the future back in exactly 20 years ago this year. And strangely enough, heading in the general direction of the future, I thought, well, let's be ridiculous here and let's go to the deep, distant past. If we can get all the way back to the origins of our species and start talking to humans currently existing, filming them, interviewing them, and asking them about origins. What is our origin story? Each individual, each culture has an origin story. So we started out in the Kalahari in Southern Africa, where I grew up. I actually grew up in Durban on the East Coast, but on the West Coast and up into the Kalahari a little bit, you meet these beautiful, beautiful little people who many are familiar with them from the Gods Must Be Crazy. Do you remember that film? So they come up to about here on me, a fully grown Bushman, or SAN. The more politically correct term perhaps is SAN, but is San. But they in fact call themselves Bushmen or Busman because they don't speak English, but they do speak Dutch. And as I grew up in South Africa and was trained in Afrikaans, which is the youngest European language on the planet, but it's an Afro-European language that's a synthesis of Dutch and a number of other languages in South Africa, we managed to communicate. So we started out there with that film. We're now fast forward 20 years. We're 2 years into filming for In Search of the Future 2. The first one was subtitled, What Do the Wise Ones Know? Second one, the forthcoming one, is titled, The Only Way Out is Up. And by that, I'm referring to out of what? Out of our predicament. I would say that we humans have backed ourselves into a corner. And we've done that because we're operating on false, erroneous, outdated assumptions about the nature of reality. That's something we can change. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's something we can change. That's a process. That's part of the work we do. So that's the focus. And just think about ancient prophecies. What are we talking about here? Who were the first prophets? What is a prophet? A prophet is someone, I would propose, who sees the future, perhaps a soothsayer, someone who can actually see the truth of what is coming if things don't change. So that's what our work is about. That's what our films are about. How do we get to where we are? And what are we going to do about it? Because it looks pretty terrifying. I would propose that it's not unrealistic to look at ourselves as an endangered species as a result of our own personal choices. We have the great blessing of free will. But if you have free will and you base your actions on false assumptions, you might just find yourself in the very position we're in. So the ancient prophets, the biblical prophets, all the way through Nostradamus, one of the greatest prophets of the 20th century, and what's the difference between a prophet and a visionary? Is a visionary someone who can imagine a future and write books about it or design architecture? And I think you will all know of Jacques Fresco. He is one of my great heroes, and I think he might be the prophet or the visionary of the 20th century, but it's not limited to scientists or indigenous people. It is a human capacity, the capacity to imagine the future. And we have to imagine a future that is worth having, because if we just let it happen by default, we may well find ourselves in trouble. So I've probably done my 10 minutes. I don't really have a clock here, but Shannon, what do you say?
Well, I think that is a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. The work you do is so important. We need to have new visions of the future. And I thank you so much. And I look forward now to introducing Jim Garrison. He has been reflecting on the significance of disclosure and how it will transform humanity's perception of itself and its place in the cosmos. He has deep experience in political activism, and his work with Ubiquity and his role in the current UFAP and UFO disclosure is, I'm sure that he will touch upon as he introduces himself. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Shannon. And thank you so much for all you've done to support and build Humanity Rising with Stan Pokras, as you mentioned in your introduction. It's been a real honor working with you, and also to get to know Andrew and many, many others who are seeking at this moment of precariousness for the human species and for the planetary ecology to enable humanity to rise to the next level of consciousness, to the next level of evolutionary harmony with each other and with all sentient life. I think for me, it's important as I work on these matters to take in each and every day the gravity of what it means that we are in our generation experiencing the conflation, the coming together of ancient prophecies, indigenous prophecies about the end of time with the scientific evidence generated mostly by climate change that indicates that humanity is literally on the precipice of self-destruction. This is a unique moment in the human journey. Never before has prophecy and secular evidence come together in such a powerful way. It's therefore a unique privilege for all of us to be alive at this moment and to take in that the choices that we make, the relationships that we form, the work that we do on our own dispositions and consciousness, like a pebble dropped in a pond, ripple out and circumnavigate the entire world and have causative effects. Our generation is going to be remembered by history as either that generation that was able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, or we succumb to defeat when victory was within our grasp. One of the most extraordinary ironies of our present situation is that virtually every solution we seek is around us, is available to us, and the only thing that keeps us from what we know is a more abundant future is a consciousness that persists in aggressiveness toward each other and a despoilation of the natural environment around us. Our plight is not something that's being done to us. It's being done by us. And therefore, it's an extraordinary experience for me to be in Washington, D.C., working on UAP disclosure, as Shannon indicated, right at the moment of optimal duress, when we're literally teetering on the brink. Who is appearing? Literally out of the heavens, but extraterrestrial beings that have been making their presence felt in increasing numbers and in increasingly direct ways over the last 80 years since the Second World War. And they've come, like the prophecies, to warn humanity that we're about ready to self-destruct, not only ourselves, but the larger planetary ecology. So one of the things that motivates me in my life right now, experiencing as I have the last decades of increasingly turbulent planetary activity is the integration, not only within my own soul, but the work that I'm doing through Humanity Rising and Ubiquity University and the New Paradigm Institute, to get people to become aware that the extraterrestrial phenomenon is not a fantasy. It's not a speculation. It's a fact. And that fact has been asserted by no less than the US government last December, stating in law that technologies of unknown origin, non-human technologies and non-human intelligences exist. They've been here for some time, and there's been communication and contact. I believe that in some mysterious way, as humanity enters its cosmos, the degree to which we can embrace our cosmic identity, we'll be able to come together in ways that we've never been able to do before, because what the extraterrestrial presence affords humanity at this moment is a new story, which all of us can experience at the same time for the same reason. So that's what I work on. That's what we at Humanity Rising are seeking to generate consciousness around day by day. And it's a pleasure and it's a privilege to share these brief thoughts with you today, Shannon. So thank you for convening this program.
Absolutely. Jim, this is an honor and a privilege to have you here. And to have Andrew with us in this conversation is really important because, as you say, Jim, this is our visitors have been around for some time. And Andrew, in his work for making these films, has come into contact with some of the prophecies and the origin stories of many different peoples. And it's my secret, well, it's not my secret, it's my opinion that we have had quite enough of the doom and gloom, and it's not going to get us anywhere. It has basically got us to where we are. And it's time for us to start looking for ways to lift our hearts and work together to create the future that we're looking for, that we can all live happily, joyfully together. And we're going to be so busy that we're not going to engage in conflict the way that we have. But that's my rosy picture for the future. But what I want to get into with you, and I also want to point out to people here that, Jim, would you just run through the different things that you've had, you've been trained in? One is philosophy, and
I did my
theology.
Yeah. I did my undergraduate in world history and political science, and then I did my master's in the history of religions and Christology, and then I did my PhD in philosophical theology.
These are very important because you have a certain cosmology that all of those disciplines have provided you with. And it is because of your educatedness that you have such depth in your opening comments. And that's what gave rise to the Jim's Nuggets. But it's because of that cosmology and the cosmologies that Andrew has had been infused with throughout his travels. And so I'm going to ask Andrew, can you talk about the different things that you've come across about origin stories or anything? You got something like that for us?
Certainly, Shannon. Now, let me mention my academic background as well, because here as well. I started out in science, so physics, chemistry, mathematics were my three majors. Actually, I grew up in the British system where you can have multiple concentrations I do not have a PhD, but I do have a very broad base. I think I have 9 letters after my name, none of which start with a P, an H, or a D, but that's okay. I can handle that. Jim did that for me. Thank you, Jim. But the most relevant one here, probably, aside from the quantum physics and the cosmology and what I learned through mathematics and organic chemistry, was my degree in social anthropology, which is the study of living cultures. And I was very interested from a very young age, having grown up in South Africa. Perhaps that you know, I grew up in a minority. I was surrounded by Zulus, and the people who trained me in terms of climbing trees and swinging from the branches were monkeys, who I'd happily call them people. They really sort of behaved a little like we do. So that social anthropology degree that I did in South Africa under the auspices of a woman, I've forgotten her name, I'm sorry, she's a very famous social anthropologist in South Africa. She did the studies of the Ndebele people. Anyway, here's the biggest point. The people who were not mentioned, I learned about the Australian Aborigines. I learned about many African cultures. I learned about the ghost dance and the Apaches and the Hopis and on and on and on. Let me tell you who I did not learn about, and then I'll tell you why. I learned nothing about the Bushmen of the Kalahari. How can this be? They carry the world's oldest DNA. There's roughly 300,000 of them right now in 5 southern African countries. They were not mentioned for the very interesting reason that they were believed to be extinct. They were literally believed to be extinct. Now, I grew up in a city called Durban, a port town famous for its Durban poison, if you've ever heard of that, and famous as a surfing spot. A lot of world famous surfers have come from Durban. One of my great sports was surfing. But if you went 4 hours inland up into the Drakensberg, the Dragon Mountains, where the mountains look like they look like the spine of a dinosaur or a dragon. You go up into those mountains and you go up into the caves and the rock shelters, and you will encounter, and I have a film that's being shown tonight on that subject, of the rock art that is all over, not just Southern Africa, it's all over Africa, all the way up into Egypt. So this is interesting. The Bushmen used to inhabit the whole of Africa. Pliny described them 2,000 years ago. And then they were basically eradicated and driven south by an invasion that went on for at least 10,000 years, if not much more. But that's a whole other story. But when they reached as far as you can go, the southern tip of Africa, they stopped there. And as they traveled, they did these beautiful paintings in these rock shelters that are there to this day. And they're polychrome, they're paintings with multiple pigments. They're absolutely gorgeous as paintings of Eland and spirit beings and on and on. So they were not mentioned. I think that's absolutely fascinating. Let me jump to the last 3 months. Connie and I just spent 3 months in Australia, down under, with some original keepers of the land, of country, as they call it, with a capital C. And they are the other most ancient community. And they too have rock art that's similar. And they too have wisdom. The Bushmen, of all of the people I've ever met, have the simplest solution to the dilemma of being a human being. And you can put it in a single word. You literally can say kindness. They are the kind people. They are the harmless people. There's a book called The Harmless People that's well worth reading, that came out of a Harvard University expedition into Namibia and Southwest Africa, where this supposedly extinct race of humans turned out to be anything but extinct. They had learned over tens of thousands of years to hide, to conceal themselves, because they had been invaded over and over again. And literally tens, 20, 50, 100,000 of them. Back then, their population may have expanded in the last while, we don't know. It wasn't until the changeover in South Africa when Nelson Mandela emerged that these folks decided to step up and say, well, guess what? We're still here. So I have this background in my Jim, you might not know this, my concentration was actually comparative religion, but I wasn't interested particularly in Christianity and Islam and Buddhism. I was very interested in knowing what the Australian Aborigines believed, what the Native Americans, what their cosmology was. For whatever reason, as a young white boy transplanted from England, growing up in South Africa, my deep interest became, what do these folks believe and how does it apply to the future of humanity? Because I sort of became a proto-futurist around the age of 14. I had a young classmate who was quite literally a genius. And we started to get into these profound conversations as 14-year-olds, going spearfishing and driving up and down the coast and having these conversations. You'd think, these are just kids, they don't know much. Well, guess what? My memory of those conversations, some of the deepest, most profound ever. And he introduced me to Zen Buddhism and things like that at that age. And on the road, Jack Kerouac. So that is a start there. I didn't. Let me say two very quick things here then. Prophecies, actual prophecies. One of the ones I've encountered, and you probably, everybody on this call has heard of, it's known as the Hopi prophecy. The Hopi prophecy. And it's a rock. There's a rock called Prophecy Rock up in Arizona, up on the Hopi reservation there. And it's a very, very simple drawing of the two paths that humanity has as our alternatives. There's a lower path, which is straight line, constant. And if you stay on that, it's known as the Hopi way or the way of peace. And we could live forever that way. But we have free will. And so there's a divergence that you have a choice. You come to a fork in the road. You can go to the upper path, which goes perfectly nice and straight for a long, long time. Then it starts to go zigzag, jig-jag, and becomes this jagged, destructive, and it suddenly simply ends. Up, down, 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 terminate. So that's the choice the Hopis said. Now that's as simple as it could get. People, you have a choice. You have free will. Make the choice of peace or else. That's that prophecy. And as far as the other, I think it's very difficult for indigenous people. We've learned this through our film. It's very difficult for them to even think about the future, partly because they live very much in the present, but also partly because their lives and their histories have been so difficult. It's hard for them to come up with a coherent vision. Oh, this is what we need to do. This is how we can integrate technology and human wisdom and all of history into co-creating a desirable future. So that's still out there. I think that's what this conference here in Crestone is about. It's coming up with a vision, a roadmap that's actually realistic. They can get us back off the edge of the cliff. And if you look around you from the edge of the cliff, you look behind you, what do you have? Beautiful fields and mountains and trees and rivers. And let's not go off the cliff. Enough from me at the moment.
Well, thank you so much. Andrew, if I remember correctly, in that Prophecy Rock, between the two timelines, there are verticals that allow a change of track. So you might be on the high side, but you can make a better choice. And I think we are at another one of those choice points. And thank you so much for bringing that in. What I was hoping that was maybe there might be some prophecies about ETs, but they may not have been written down, and they may have been part of the rock art. And I do seem to remember rock art of astronaut-looking things, but we don't have the words that go with it. And that's the thing that Jim has been studying. The words that have come along with the epiphanies, the experiences, the religious experiences of people that have resulted in them being deified or sainted or whatnot. And it is these transcendent experiences that allow regular folk to be more than regular folk. And I think it's within the capacity of all of us to be more than just regular folk. We're not ordinary. And it is through the experience with the divine. And what is the divine? Is that ETs? Are they NHI, non-human intelligences? And how do we look at the writings of the past in that connotation? Am I making myself clear where I would like to steer this, Jim?
Sure.
Thank you. Come on in.
I think that's a very important question, in fact, because as we come to terms with the reality of the extraterrestrial contact and communication in our own time, in our own generation, what we're coming to understand is that they've been here for some time. And that whether it's the Hopi or the Pueblo Indians in the southwest part of the United States, whether it's the Achuar Indians in the Amazon and the other tribes in Brazil and the Amazonia, whether it's in deep Africa, the Dogon people, the traditions in India, China, every single religious and indigenous tradition known has in its origin stories narratives about extraterrestrial contact. And in Islam, for example, we are the ETs. The Quran records that humanity originally was on another planet in a far off galaxy. And we misbehaved ourselves and were exiled from that planet and were sent to planet Earth to go through a purgatorial period. And you can go to Sri Lanka to a place called Adam's Rock, where they say that Adam first set foot on our planet. In the Taoist tradition, they have rituals to the 28 constellations and the entities that abide in those constellations. In the ancient Sumerian mythologies of the Anunnaki, it's recorded that the Anunnaki came from the 10th planet, Numaru, and came to Earth, and that began the contact. In the Bible, there are various passages that allude to human contact with non-human intelligences. So one of the things that is beginning to emerge is that humanity is the result of a hybrid program. And if you think about it, no one in the contemporary scientific world can explain how the human species arose so dramatically and so differently from the upper primates. How did we become a species that could speak in this kind of language, that could create monumental architecture like the pyramids or the Taj Mahal, who could figure out physics and engineering and send somebody to the moon? How do we understand ourselves? My belief is that as we engage more and more deeply in an understanding of the prophecies that Andrew was talking about, within the context that these prophecies, almost all of them, have some reference to human extraterrestrial contact, and communication, we will begin to radically expand human identity and human history and humanity's ultimate relationship with higher intelligences. And the final thing that I would say is that if you look at it sort of objectively, the West, essentially the Judeo-Christian tradition, was the only tradition that forgot this. If you go to Latin America, if you go to Africa, you go to Asia, you go to Hinduism, you go to Buddhism, you go in Taoism, you go to any of the indigenous traditions, they say, oh yeah, these are the star beings. We're talking to them all the time. And you Westerners think that when a craft landed in Roswell in 1947, crash landed in Roswell in 1947, that was the first time that non-human intelligence showed up. You guys are just finding out what we've known all along. So, you know, when Andrew's talking about this ancient Navajo Pueblo art of prophecy about the possible pathways, you know, that was inscribed on the walls. No one really knows when, but it's ancient, ancient, ancient. They knew what we are only now beginning to realize. And so part of humanity rising, part of the uplifting of human consciousness, in my view, is to reconnect ourselves with the ancient indigenous people that we vanquished as we built what we call civilization. But actually, what we're going to come to realize is we're not civilized at all. They are the ones that are civilized. We lost civilization because, as Andrew says, we forgot about kindness because we surrendered our kindness in the ruthless pursuit of power over others, power over the environment. And now we're seeking to reverse engineer ET technology so we can create weapons that can go out in outer space and confront them in a military way. That's how uncivilized the West has become. So we have a lot of self-therapy to do, and the indigenous people should be seen as the Western civilization's psychotherapeutic pathway back to reality.
I so agree. I so agree, Jim. And this is actually where I was hoping to have Linda talk about her experience. The Western general knowledge we've been dumbed down rather dramatically.
Totally.
And to think that people are ridiculed because of their contact with the divine, and that ridicule has damaged them, traumatized them so badly that they can't function in reality anymore. This has caused a deep sickness in our social structure. And it's individually based, and it's because of the powers that hold the power so dramatically, keeping everything secret. It is the time for revelations. It's time for us to know what's been going on. It's time for us to be able to delve deeper into what has been hidden from us, and for us to start to encapsulate, incorporate all of the knowledge that has gone on before, so that we can boil it into wisdom. The white race generally are barbarians, and it's time for us to step up. Love us, I do, but I am very clear on our limitations and looking to our Indigenous brothers who are so willing to help us now. And I love that they have been counseled through their wisdom that there would come a time for them to open to us and to teach us. Andrew, can you speak to that?
Shannon, yes. I want to just say something on the subject of this idea that the white race are the villains. Would somebody point out to me a race, a skin color, an ethnic group that has not behaved in precisely the way we have? Tell me about the Japanese in the 1930s and all the way into World War II. The Chinese, what they have done, what they're doing to this day. I grew up among the Zulus. The Zulus were the cruelest, most powerful warriors. They were invaders who had come down to southern Africa, displacing other cultures as they came. Shaka Zulu, the famous Shaka Zulu. The whites had arrived at the time he was most active. He had murdered roughly 1 million of what you might regard as his own people. They belonged to other tribes, but they were equally black. So this is not war, and this kind of behavior is not a purely white thing. It is a human thing. Yeah. I would tell you that the Bushmen of the Kalahari, who are the world's oldest people, who have maybe 350,000 years of being human, never went to war. Okay, that's worth thinking about. They're still around. They have something to teach us. The Hopi and the Pueblos never went to war, but many of the other cultures were invaders. The Navajo were invaders. The Apache were invaders. And once those guys got horses, they became very, very effective. And once they got horses and guns, look out, okay? Yeah. So this is our species is a work in progress. It's time for us. Now we have the tools to look at ourselves, look in this incredible mirror of the record we have of our own history, our own potential, and wake up. So, Shannon, I think you wanted to go to and Linda was going to do that, the whistleblower factor. I just want to mention very quickly, I lived in Maui. I grew up in South Africa, but I sailed across the Atlantic and came here and found myself in Santa Cruz, California, and then found myself on the island of Kauai, followed by Maui. On Maui at that time, 71, 72, the hottest rock band was called Space Patrol. And they profoundly, deeply believed in UFOs. It was part of their reality. They saw them. I had yet to see such a thing. I now have, but I hadn't then. And there was a retired U.S. Air Force major. I think his name was Harris. I don't remember him. I'm not certain about that. But he was actually traveling and teaching on the subject of the suppression of information about the UFOs. So this is the very early 70s. So this was not new to me, and it was not new to him or them in those days. I came and I joined that. So this has been going on for a long time. I don't know if he was suppressed or got into trouble for revealing this information, but this is not new. Finally, we just came back from Australia, and I had the idea for another film. We're shooting In Search of the Future, The Only Way Out Is Up. And I thought, could be a really good film called Star Nation. Because what emerged from the first film was this: we come from the stars. That film asked the question, where did we come from? And the consensus mostly had to do with, we come from the stars. Get to Australia, started interviewing people, putting them on camera, Indigenous elders, and saying, tell me about UFOs, tell me about space beings. Do you have any? And every one of them simply opened their mouth, started talking, and said, I was 4 years old at the time when I met my first one. And I stroked him, and his skin was like a reptile, very strange, like scaly. Ooh, okay. And another one said, I was 17 and we stopped on a bridge. The car had broken down or something like that. And he took a walk and he looked up and he said, It was 5 or 6 stories tall. It was a spaceship. So all of these stories are just sitting there in the, now this isn't ancient, these are living people currently contemporary. What it really interests me, Jim, is how long has this been going on? You know, how have they been here forever? My theory is this: they have been here for a very, very long time. Jim, you know the word crypto-terrestrial. I'd love to talk about that. So when the Bushmen, the so-called Bushmen, were being invaded by the two people, the Bantu, the black people from West Africa who came down and basically colonized all of Africa. As they retreated, I mentioned they learned how to, they had at least 10,000 or more years to learn how to hide, how to disappear into the landscape. I propose this: these so-called extraterrestrials have been here for a very, very long time. I think they're very advanced indeed. Therefore, they would know how to blend into the landscape. For example, how simply to plunge into the ocean and build a city down there that we would know nothing about. I suspect they've been here for a very long time. And so crypto meaning hidden, they're the hidden terrestrials. There's those who may come, they may be as a part of Mama Gaia as much as we are. If we came from elsewhere and they came from elsewhere a very long time ago, who knows? I see, it's just the most fascinating thing.
Well, I think you're right. If I could comment, Shannon,
Oh, absolutely.
on what Andrew just said. You know, the fascinating thing for me, certainly, as I've been immersed in the disclosure movement, is that the more we're finding out about the extraterrestrials, the more mysterious and complex and wonderful the entire phenomenon becomes. Most of us, when we think of ETs, we think of literally little short grays or ETs in a craft. They come from Alpha Centauri. You know, they fly faster than the speed of light. They crash land in New Mexico near Roswell, and we retrieve the bodies, and we think of it in kind of a physical way. But Andrew's absolutely right. What we're beginning to understand, and this was the first sort of breakthrough, is that they weren't, some of them may have come from, you know, the star system Sirius or the star system Orion, etc. But some of them were coming from other dimensions. And as we began to realize through physics and cosmology that parallel universes exist in an infinite number of ways, and so you can have things happening at the same time in the same place, but they're just different dimensions of space and time, you begin to realize that part of what we are experiencing in terms of the extraterrestrial phenomenon is just different frequencies from different dimensions. And that's why they seem to just go in and out. And this is interesting because many of the communications between these ETs and humans are expressions that it's really difficult to get as dense as humans need in order for us to see them and feel them. And if you just remember that, you know, let's take the light spectrum. We humans can only see a very narrow band. Most other species, like bats and eagles and all kinds of, they see a lot more than we do, and they see the world, they experience the world visually in a completely different way. Same with audio. We don't have any sense of what's really going on in terms of what you can, because our audio frequency is as narrow as our visual frequency. And that's also true of our psychic abilities. So we humans, we think we're the apex species, right? Our dogs and cats have more psychic abilities than we do because they're operating at different frequencies. So part of what the these other non-human intelligence are saying to us is, listen, you humans are really dense, and it's hard for us to get dense enough for you to see us. And so that's another thing just to take in. And then you've got Andrew's point. And that's why extraterrestrials, meaning non-human, they're now starting to talk about crypto-terrestrials, that these guys have been here the whole time. But they're on a different frequency. They're living inside a mountain, or they're living in some base underneath the water, and there's more and more evidence that the UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are also paralleled by USOs, unidentified submerged objects. And then many are starting to talk about ultra-terrestrials, meaning the ETs that we're experiencing are coming to us from the future. They're future humans. And if you think about it, just think of what, the Steven Spielberg ET, right? They don't have much of a mouth. They don't have teeth. Ears are gone. They seem to be pretty almost genderless. Well, that's humans in 1,000,000 years. Why? Because they operate purely by emotional and mental telepathy. They take their nutrients through their skin. They don't need mouths because they don't talk. They don't need ears like we have, big earlobes and stuff like that, because they sense the world in a completely expanded way, right? They have big eyes because they're visually very astute. And apparently they have IQs. Think of Einstein, of an IQ. He was a genius at an IQ. He clocked out at about 180. What about an IQ of 300 to 400? Right? So as we experience this phenomenon, what is happening, to the point that you made earlier, Shannon, about revelation, is what our categories of cognition, our categories of epistemology, how we know, our categories of ontology and phenomenology, what do we think the world is, are literally being exploded. And we're coming to realize that what we think of as these ETs, they have a completely different relationship to space-time. We're at a point of very primitive relationship to space-time. And so we can't conceive of anybody going faster than the speed of light, because we can't conceive of it. That's as big a thought as Einstein could think. But these ETs are way beyond that. And if you can start to morph space-time, you not only radically transform your capacity to move through space, but also you transform your capacity to move through time. So just think that thought for a moment, that there's crypto-terrestrials that have just been hanging out like the Bushmen for, a couple million years, realizing you want to survive, be as invisible as you possibly can, because there's predators out there. And then think ultra-terrestrials. They're coming to us from the future. And if I could just make one more point, Shannon, one of the things that's the reason why they're here is because we're about ready to blow ourselves up. They appeared when the United States dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we entered the atomic age, and we entered the age of overkill. One of the realities about time travel is that you can only be a human in the future if the humans now maintain the continuity of human life. And so they're seeing us, and we're at this juncture point where we could destroy everything. And they're coming back, and as best they can, as ethereal, it's like, how does an X-ray become part of the spectrum of light you can see? It's not so easy. They're wanting to encourage us, to say upsy daisy one more time and actually secure the continuity of life so that they can be secure that they will exist in the future. It's very, very mysterious. It's very wonderful. And it is one of the most exciting moments in my life as I'm allowing my mind and my heart, my categories of knowing to be completely exploded into this wonderful reality.
And honestly, and thank you so much, Jim and Andrew, absolutely. And all of this is so exciting. And it comes down to we live ordinary lives, one ordinary moment at a time. And until we acknowledge that there is magic being woven into our lives, accepting that magic is anything that goes bump in the night that you don't understand. Science has limitations and it doesn't understand time and reality at this point in time. And that's going to be a subject for Sunday's conversation. And Jim, if you really want to be a part of that conversation, I could make room for you. But I believe I have had future memories. And we've talked about bending time and being in different places in time. And there's exercises that Joanna Macy has developed in which you go back in time and talk to yourself as a little child and give yourself comfort. And I do feel strongly that we can do that. And it's not our imagination, it is actual, maybe it's further into the future in which I actually make that happen. But I feel that I have had those experiences of talking to the me that I know as me now when I was a little girl. I was deeply and wanted long hair and long flouncy skirts and the things that I as a person feel very strongly attached to. And I think that perhaps, Jim, you might have had experiences like that or visitations from other people within your family lineage. Perhaps your grandfather came and talked to you. I do feel that we are supported by our ancestors in a more tangible way than we have yet come to a realization of. And it's an important resource for us. And Jim, this is one of the fields that you bring people in to talk about. And I'm so thrilled with Humanity Rising because it gives me a place where the things that I have not understood about my life come into a realm of possibility. For example, when I was 9 years old, I had an experience in which it's too long a story to go into right now, but I was told that later on in life, I would get my very own dog. He would come and find me. 40 years later, he did. I could not, it wasn't a prophecy until it came true. And I'm as ordinary as the next person. How do we know about prophecy? How do we tell a prophecy from a fantasy? And how do we know that the white buffalo calf, the birth of the first white buffalo calf, does mean the beginning of the 500 years of peace? We're celebrating the 30th birthday, and oh my gosh, though I'm sorry, though there's not peace in this world at this point, except for me and a bunch of my friends, and most of us go to Humanity Rising. We have a good time there, but we are watching war going on in the world, And so how do we make that prophecy, that fantasy, be a prophecy? Andrew, have you got any ideas on that?
I could say something on that subject.
Yeah, you go ahead, Andrew, and then I'll comment.
Excellent.
Yeah, Jim, this is fun, isn't it? So, yeah, let's think about reality. There's a lot of fantasy. There's a lot of imaginary constructs as to the nature of life, the nature of reality, the nature of the universe. But let's think about science. Now, by science, I don't mean reductionist science. I don't mean the limited vision that we've gained through our various Newtonian technological instruments and so on. We've gained a lot from that, but it's more than that. Let's think about Einstein's concept of time. He said, and he was very tongue-in-cheek, he said, time exists so that everything doesn't happen at once. Okay. However, I have a suspicion that everything does happen at once. We perceive it through these various filters, which we can think of as our consciousness. We live in I like to think of the universe we live in as a bioelectromagnetic entity. And I like to think of myself as a bioelectromagnetic entity. In other words, at the minute level, the quantum level, the level where we are literally spirit. There is nothing that is real except spirit that is manifesting in these various forms. One of the things that creator has learned to do by virtue of being creator is to create. It's like an artist learns to paint, a pianist learns to create music. Creator is in the process of this marvelous experiment that we can think of as reality, as the universe, as this ever evolving, ever learning, ever expanding non-physical entity that is manifesting the physical, but that's just part of it. So the physics is, you have physics and you have metaphysics. The physics we think we know, the physics we perhaps think we don't know, or that we trust our intuition to tell us about. So as far as time and space, the whole thing is entirely made up by creator. And we are not separate from that. There is this whole illusion of separation is the biggest challenge we humans have. We think we're separate from creator. We think we're separate from each other. And yet science is showing us that such a thing is completely and utterly impossible. There's no way to separate. There's no other place to go to. We're here. We're here for the journey. And the journey started long before 13.8 billion years ago. That was just that particular wormhole producing this particular knowledge. I think, Jim, there are multiple dimensions, multiple metaverses, all these bubble universes, all these ideas of these possibilities. Anything creator can imagine already exists because it's instantaneous. And there is no time, but we need to perceive things through the window of time, or it'd be horribly confusing.
Well, that's your cue, Jim. Come on in.
Well, thank you for that, Andrew, very much. I think the comment I would make on your question, Shannon, in light of what Andrew just articulated about how one differentiates between fantasy and prophecy, is that I don't think we can really know which is which until the prophecy is fulfilled. And that's an important understanding, I think, that what separates madness from foresight is whether the insight in the state of madness actually comes to fulfillment or not. And I think what is remarkable about this time in our history is that we're seeing all around us prophecy and fulfillment happening in very dramatic ways. And so that it's in the actual fulfillment of the prophecy that we understand that the prophet was actually seeing something of great import. A second comment that I would make, which pertains to the white buffalo, it's also true that different spiritual traditions over time accumulate a numinosity around something like the birth of a white buffalo. It's rare, and therefore, when it happens, it is a signal of some type of confluence between the cosmic and terrestrial order, think astrology, that is giving an opportunity for humanity to expand its sense of knowing. In ancient Egypt, for example, they would look out for, in terms of, they had cattle. And when they found a particular cow that had all these very specific markings, when they all came together, which was very, very rare, they would take the cow and put it in the temple because they knew that that cow did not emerge randomly, but synchronistically. And so that's another aspect of prophecy. When you come into a particular stream or cave, as the Druids did when they came to Chartres, over 3,000 years ago in France, and they found a promontory rising above the forest. And at the top of the promontory, they found a cave. And when the Druids went into the cave, they sensed a peculiar energy that they defined and understood as feminine. And that is the other part of prophecy, is not that it's predictive, but it opens up a portal for higher human understanding of the divine realm. And I think that that is what's inherent in the white buffalo. That's what's inherent in the sacred site of Chartres, are portals for what Andrew was talking about, portals from the finite into the infinite, portals from space into spaciousness, portals from causality into synchronicity. And when we go down that rabbit hole, and we realize, as Andrew stated, that it is completely open to all of our consciousness, and that consciousness can take different forms of permutations. And then we come back into this time of ordinary consciousness. Because our spirituality has been expanded, we experience more in our ordinary world. And that's what we experience as the sacred, as the holy. And that's what makes us more kind. That's what makes us more compassionate, because we become empathetic to all sentient being, as if for the first time.
Oh, I knew I brought you along for a reason. Thank you so much, Jim. One of the most important reasons for me to have this conversation is because I was given a promise, and maybe it is a prophecy. And in this time of conflict that we're all going through, all of the colors, and here at EarthStock, here in Crestone, I have to say it is mixing of all our colors, and we're in the cauldron. And we're being cooked, man. This is quite an experience. But what I really want to share this promise, because Jim, I walked up Mount Sinai because of this promise. I went to Making Weird the Norm in the UK. with Peter Mary, your Chief Innovation Officer of Ubiquity University. And because I was going there, I was, halfway around the world. I decided that when I heard the call from Ton van der Kroon and Anne Weisless, that they were going to walk up Mount Sinai, I had to take the promise with me. And the promise was given to me by Mother Earth in a synchronous moment that I like to call Mom, the magic and ordinary moments. In that moment, it was angst and anger, and I'd had enough. And I said, that's enough. Let's talk about something else going forward. And I planted my feet. And I looked down to take my next step, and right between my toes was a little round white rock with an arrow on it pointing forward. And I laughed, and it was like Mother Earth agreeing with me. And so I was inspired. And so I repeated going forward, and I pranced a big step and I said there, and I pranced another big step and I said shall be, and there I stood on one foot looking for the rest of the answer that I didn't know what it was, and I wanted to look the inspiration, and there wasn't any there, and there wasn't any there. And I looked straight ahead, and I had to walk up closer. It couldn't be up closer. Off the curve of the path, in amongst all the rocks and the weeds, was a big round rock with a peace sign in it, created over eons of time and rounded by the waves and washed and put exactly where I would find it in that moment. And so what that says to me is that going forward, there shall be peace, and we'll have to look for it and believe in it. And I know that it's not just for me, because mine is incomplete if you don't all share it too. And so how do we make this promise be a prophecy? And we can only do it together. And so I invite your comments on that. And Jim, I would invite you first, and then Andrew, and then maybe we'll invite Lisa Ayers to come back from the conversation.cc to tell us what the people in the watch party think. Come on in, Jim.
Yes, well, let me start by adding something about prophecy and fantasy, because I was very struck by what Andrew said.
Mm.
I think what marks a prophet is the ability to enter the realm that Andrew described through the portal and come back. And because the person has an expanded sense of space-time, he or she can look into the future and know what's going to happen simply because he or she has an expanded sense of time. And as a parent, when you see your little child approaching a fire, for example, and you say, if you touch that, you're going to get burnt. From the child's point of view, they experience that as prophecy because they've never touched fire before. But as a parent, you have a bigger sense of time and space. So you can see that certain acts have consequences. And I think that's true at a personal level with a child, but it's also true with some people at the level of culture, at the level of history. They contain expanded notions of past, present, and future. And therefore, they're actually speaking from the present, but people with a more constrained sense of past, present, and future experience it as prophecy. And I wanted to say that before commenting on your story, because I think you were having a prophetic moment, right? You're walking along. All of a sudden, something is drawn to your attention. And then another rock is drawn to your attention. And you realize that you've experienced a peace symbol. And what happened was an epiphany. All of a sudden, your categories of space-time were exploded, and your life was changed. Because that epiphanal experience, as I'm hearing it from you, Shannon, transformed your categories of cognition, and you've never been the same. Because now you're more motivated for peace. You're more attentive to what it's going to take to get us from here to there. You're embodying the bodhisattva because you know that it doesn't matter that you feel peace. It's only when everyone feels at peace that we will actually be at peace. So we can have these moments in time that take us out of time, but understanding, as Eliot said, that it's only in time that the moment in the rose garden, as he puts it, the moment in the arbor at Smokefall, the moment in the church when the rain dropped can be remembered and experienced in time. So the timeless moments that we have transform our ordinary experience of time. And that's what brings in the sacred. That's what brings in the holy, the numinous. And that's what changes our life. That's enlightenment. In our small little ways, that was an enlightenment experience, a prophetic moment that gave you an expanded sense of who you are.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. What about you, Andrew? What do you think?
Well, I'd like to return to this idea of, I'm seeing it as time travel. So think about the 4 dimensions, right? The space-time continuum. We have the 3 dimensions of space. We have the 2 dimension of time. And there's basically your Einsteinian vision of the space-time continuum. And we know that we can slither around in space, right? We know that I can get up and walk out of here and I can move around, but can I slither out of time? And so that's a very interesting question. So Jim just used a beautiful 2 words, timeless moment, and which brings to mind one of my great heroes, Aldous Huxley. And he said, this timeless moment, as in there's only this timeless moment. So in terms of moments, Shannon, I'm not sure there's any such thing as an ordinary moment because every moment is extraordinary. And there's only one. If you really get down to it, the past is fantasy. The future is fantasy, and yet we're talking about prophecy. Is it possible to slither around in time and get ourselves somewhere else, then come back? Which brings us to the near-death experience. I'm not sure how long this has been going on, but Connie and I have a friend who did her PhD thesis. She interviewed 1,000 experiences who had died, and she herself had died and had an extraordinary experience, come back and did her PhD in this. Beautiful, amazing lady we met in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it is possible to leave this reality, go somewhere else, as in Eben Alexander, for example, as in, what's the woman's name from, what's her name, Dying to Tell, no, I'm not Dying to Tell the Story, that's another one. Anyway, there are many, many, many books and teachers of this subject of people who have passed away, have been clinically dead, who then have had this extraordinary timeless experience that could have gone on for infinities and then returned. Is that time travel? And does that have anything to do with prophecy? Let's say someone went somewhere and learned something or experienced something and then came back and literally lived to tell the story. Wow. So I think this is really interesting. I wrote a novel. First, let me just finish this quickly. I wrote a novel in 1970, 71. What's that?
Carry on. I'm sorry I interrupted. This is so exciting for me.
Okay. There's the book was inspired by Aldous Huxley's Island to some degree, if you know Island. It was this fantasy community where it was really run on very intelligent bases, very spiritual, with initiations for young men and young women, and a very intelligent society that in this current world couldn't survive. In the end was tragic, but you had learned to reconcile. So you actually came out of that okay. My book asks the question, what's it going to take for humanity to wake up and get over all this stuff that's endangering us right now? And I came up with 4 answers. And so the book includes all of those things. So what profound, extraordinary thing could happen that would change everything to the point where we'd drop all the weapons of war and let all of that stuff go, drop the illusion of separation, drop the competition, drop the violence, drop the way women are treated, all of those kinds of things. And so the 4 I came up with were, the first one, this was 1971, by the way, was a substance. What if we'd discovered LSD, we were exploring these psychoactive substances that elevated our state of consciousness? What if there was something that literally permanently rewired us? So I named that substance moksha. Moksha is the Sanskrit word for liberation, and it is the fictitious substance in Aldous Huxley's Island. There's that reference. All of the young ones went through an initiation using the psychedelics journey, this substance that brought them a degree of enlightenment. What if there was an actual enlightenment chemical? So a part of this, and what if you could put it in aerosol cans and go around spraying it into the air intakes of movie theaters and things like that? So stuff like that was happening. And then what if, once you've had that experience, now here's the point, to do with time. When you had this, when you were exposed to this compound, you appeared to be unconscious. If you were sitting in a movie theater, you would go completely out for maybe as much as 30 minutes. But during that 30 minutes, you had all of eternity to figure it out. So your journey in that 30 minutes of perceived time here was infinity there. So when you woke up and rejoined the world, you were a different being because you'd had. And then the other things in the book were the second coming. Let's have Jesus come back. He comes back, but he walks in and everybody recognizes him and they say, "You're back." He says, "No, I'm not. I never left." So that was part of that novel. The other was a war, a nuclear war, so extreme that the survivors woke up as a result and said, "We're never doing that again." So that was a radical part of this story that takes place in a 24-hour period. And the final one was an alien invasion. So in the book, the Soviets and the Americans are going at it. They're just about to press the big red button and destroy everything. And the sky is suddenly filled with orbs, to the point where the satellites were blinded. Nothing could, they just had, and all of a sudden attention against the enemy there was directed to the skies. And here's the alien invasion. So anyway, I've been thinking this stuff for a while. That's a fun book. It got to Doubleday and there was interest, but I never did get it published. So,
well, I think that should be changed.
So if an ND, a near-death experience, is actually similar to the one I was talking about, where you appear to go unconscious as a result of ingesting something or breathing something, what if a prophet is someone who can time travel? It's not normally space travel. You're not going somewhere physically, but you're going somewhere metaphysically in time. You've got yourself out of this moment here to another moment there, and you return and you say there will be a white buffalo calf woman and such, and it will have such and such a consequence within your cultural heritage, the belief system of your tribe, your community, right? So I think this is a very interesting thing, because every human being has the capacity to be a prophet, to be a visionary, to understand something that the masses don't understand for whatever reason. What if we all woke up? That might be interesting.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
I think that's a lovely idea, Andrew. And we've come up with a lot of very good ideas, I think, between us. And I know that we have not followed some of these threads either forwards or backwards. And I do look forward to investigating them more deeply. But we have back in the room Lisa Ayers. She's been listening to the broadcast. And I'm wondering what is going on out in the world while we were having our moment here. Lisa, come and tell us.
Wow. Thank you, guys. What a really interesting conversation. And we could take it just in any direction. And I have 2 pages of notes, but I've highlighted some big ones. And I think there are some very specific questions that people are looking forward to asking you in the afterglow, and I'll leave those ones. But we're looking for clarity between disclosure versus revealing. We are very interested in facts and figures, where all this information is coming from, when did it come? We're also very interested in the illusion of separateness and this idea of prophecy and secular evidence coming together, knowing that nothing is random. Where can we find these prophecies? How can we as the public learn about it and share about it? And how can we secure the continuity of life? And so much more. But I look really forward to having this conversation on the afterglow on the conversation.cc. And there are several people waiting for us there, including Tracy from Egypt, who is going to be having a discussion from the Egyptian point of view of everything that Jim has been talking about. And so she is so excited. And I know that her presentation is happening very soon, so she may not join us, but there's always that other day Shannon was talking about that Jim might come and join us. Hint, hint.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, that would be Sunday when we talk about time and the nature of reality. And that is what I'm really looking forward to as well. But before that, we're going to be talking about getting along with each other. We're going to talk about getting along with Gaia and getting along with ourselves. And those are 3 very important questions. And then on Saturday, we're going to be talking about how we come into coherence as one song, one universe. And so I'm really looking forward to that conversation. And I want to tell you, people out there in the real world, please join us in theconversation.cc. You'll see a blue button there that says join the Zoom room. That is where we are gathering for the afterglow. And I'm hoping that Lisa is going to put the link in the chat for us so that we can just hit the button and magically appear in that conversation at theconversation.cc. And this has been a really good conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of my reality. I have been inspired by both of you, and I know that you are inspiring a lot of other people. I would like to invite a last comment from each of you, first Jim and then Andrew. Come on in.
Well, first of all, thank you, Shannon, for putting this together. It's been an honor to share perspectives with my good friend Andrew, as always. And I think the final comment I would make is just to elaborate on what Andrew just said about, there's often the spiritual experience is a near-death experience. And as they've been analyzing all the people who've had experiences with extraterrestrials, they've come to understand that the ET contact experience is virtually similar to near-death experiences. You have an experience that initially is traumatic. You go on this journey. All of a sudden, you come into the light. And when you return from the experience, as Shannon did from her experience on Sinai, the world in your life is never the same again. You feel expanded. You feel transformed. You feel the sacred in a new way. And I think that's the opportunity for our generation in our time. We're under extraordinary duress. We're literally on the brink of self-destruction. We have every conceivable solution lying all around us, and it's been this way for decades. We're wrestling with what it means to be conscious in a more refined way. The ETs are showing up. Indigenous prophecy is impinging itself upon us. It's like all the trains are coming into the station at the same time, and they're focalizing on our personal and collective consciousness. So this is an opportunity for magic moments all the time if we would only open ourselves to the voltage that wants to come through. And one of the things that I find so exciting is that just listening to the news, paying attention to what's going on in the indigenous world, understanding that it's all synchronistically coming together for one reason, and that is the redemption and liberation of humanity so that we can endure on this earth in a more refined way and act in this moment in a manner that our children under the 7th generation will look back on this time and give thanks for the acuity of consciousness and the compassion of the heart that a critical mass of us were able to gain, and thereby humanity in our time was saved. That's the challenge that I try to live by day. And I just want to share that excitement. This is a great time to be alive, everybody. A great time to love, a great time to have near-death experiences and ET experiences and loving experiences each and every time we interact. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate your perspective so much. Andrew, come on in.
Yeah, so Jim, thank you so much for that. It's been just beautiful and a pleasure and a privilege spending time with you this way. How sweet it is. I want to end with a message. I think I can say that I am able to deliver a message from the ancient Aboriginal custodians of country in the land down under. And it's ridiculously, incredibly simple. Now, I want to say something to preface that with, and that is that I had no idea of the hell that the indigenous people down under went through as a result of colonization. It's simply not part. I'm sorry to see, it gets me. So there are two kinds of people down under, white fellows and black fellows, and there's no racism there. That's just what we call each other, right? So it was beautiful to be a white fella among the black fellows. The black fellows were systematically eliminated to a great degree, and there are those still living who can remember their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents describing horrific scenes of slaughter that are just so disturbing. I didn't know that. I did not know that. Secondly, those people, those black fellas who had lived there for at least the last 60,000 years, possibly much longer. You may or may not know about Mungo Man and Mungo Lady, but they were discovered 50 years ago this year by a relatively new friend of ours, an ecogeologist, who found these skeletal remains, and they were dated to 42,000 years ago. Now, you think the time of Jesus 2,000 years ago was long, long ago? Try 42,000 years ago. Think about Europe 42,000 years ago. Those people, these burials were sacred ceremonial burials with red ochre and sacred fire. And so thank God for the fire, because there's the carbon, there's the ability to date them using carbon dating. Through it, all of those millennia before the white man came, they were agriculturalists. They are the founders of agriculture. This whole thing of, oh, it happened somewhere else. It was very deeply well established. That entire country was very well manicured and nurtured and planted and provided food for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. We don't know how many, but about 650 different language groups. Extraordinary. Who then, the invasion came with total ignorance, total savagery, quite honestly. And these people have gone through absolute hell. Back to Africa, the Bushmen of the Kalahari have been through absolute hell. And guess what? Their principal attitude to me as a white fellow showing up is kindness. So the message from both of those cultures, most recently the Australians, they are saying right now, and there's a movement just emerging. Drop it, get over it, forget it. We can't do anything other than know the truth, but then let it go and walk together into the future with kindness to one another. That's the message that I have returned from Australia with.
Oh, Andrew, that is so in alignment
Beautiful.
with the going forward. There shall be peace. Let it go. We need forgiveness. We need to help each other heal from the traumas that we have inflicted upon each other. All of our colors have done the wrong thing in past times. Let us start doing the right things, taking care of each other, helping each other. I honor Stan Pockris with his vision of that was the age of, well, I don't know what it is, but I know what we're moving into, and that is the age of helpfulness. And it is through that that we will find peace. And I look forward to talking more at theconversation.cc in the afterglow. Thank you, everyone out in the real world, for joining us here. And I will see you in the conversation where you can have a voice too. Thank you so much for coming.
I just want to say that
yes.
I'm on an iPad. I'm on Connie's iPad. I do not see the chat, so I don't know how to get there. So I may come in a bit late, but I'll figure out how to do it if I don't show up immediately.
And let me tell you.
I'll WhatsApp
well,
it.
you do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell everybody how to get there and be real clear about it. You go up into your search bar, your URL bar, and you type in THE conversation.cc, and you hit enter. And you scroll down a little bit, and there's a blue button there that says join the Zoom room. Click that button, and you will join us.
Okay. I do not have a bar. I'm on an iPad. It's a completely different image.
Well,
that's okay.
It's so good. You will find it, and when you go into your browser, go into any browser. Okay.
Yeah.
Shannon, I have another engagement, so I'll have to miss it. But
no,
thank you, everybody.
Jim. Oh, heartbroken.
Oh no. We'll see you soon.
Well, I know you're so darn busy with all these UAPs and UFOs and Congress people, and I am so deeply in awe of the path that you're walking, Jim. Thank you so much, and that you manage to keep humanity rising on a daily basis as you have since the beginning, actually not quite since we did at the beginning, because ladies and gentlemen, it was 7 days a week. And it was just madness. And I'm so glad that you got a little stroke of sanity and cut it back to 5 days a week. So even on stat holidays, we are broadcasting from 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. That's 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific. And it has changed my life. And I am so, so grateful. Thank you so much for all you do, Jim.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Andrew. Always good to interact.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, the entire crew who put this beautiful event together. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
We couldn't do it without you, Andrew. And thank you so much, Lisa. Let's go and talk with Andrew over in the conversation.cc. See you guys there. Bye for now.